The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the marble-floored lobby of Sterling Industries at 11:37 on a Tuesday night. Marcus Thompson stepped out, his worn work boots silent against the polished stone as he adjusted the strap of his supply cart. The building's silence wrapped around him like a familiar blanket, broken only by the distant hum of air conditioning and the occasional creak of settling steel. At 42, Marcus carried himself with a quiet dignity that years of hardship hadn't managed to break. His janitor's uniform was clean and pressed, despite being second-hand, and his graying hair was neatly combed back from a face that showed traces of the successful man he'd once been. His hands, now calloused from cleaning supplies and long hours, had once guided million-dollar investment portfolios with the same careful precision he now applied to his night shift duties. Marcus pulled out his phone and smiled at the wallpaper photo of his 80-year-old daughter Emma, fast asleep in their small apartment 6 miles away. She'd insisted on waiting up for him earlier, her homework spread across their kitchen table, determined to show him her perfect score on the math test. The pride in her eyes when she'd announced she wanted to be like Daddy when she grew up had nearly brought him to tears. She still believed he was the smartest man in the world, and he worked 3 jobs to keep that belief alive. The security guard at the front desk nodded without looking up from his magazine. Marcus had been cleaning this building for 8 months now, and most of the staff barely acknowledged his existence. He preferred it that way. Invisibility had become his armor, protecting him from questions he wasn't ready to answer and judgments he couldn't bear to face. Tonight felt different, though. As Marcus wheeled his cart toward the executive floor, something in the air seemed charged with possibility. He didn't know that 20 floors above, Richard Sterling sat in his corner office, putting the finishing touches on a plan that would change both their lives forever. Where in the world are you watching from right now? We love hearing from our global community, and this story is for every hard-working parent out there, no matter what time zone you're in. The 20th floor of Sterling Industries buzzed with residual energy even at midnight, the scent of expensive cologne and printer toner lingering in the air. Marcus began his methodical routine, emptying wastebaskets filled with discarded reports that represented more money than he'd see in a lifetime. As he worked, fragments of conversations from earlier in the day echoed in his mind. He'd overheard 2 junior executives discussing a merger proposal while restocking the supply closet that afternoon. Their analysis was completely wrong. They were missing the debt-to-equity ratios that would make the deal catastrophic for Sterling Industries. Marcus had bitten his tongue, reminding himself that his opinion no longer mattered. He was just the cleaning man now. Richard Sterling's corner office loomed at the end of the hallway like a monument to success. At 55, Sterling had built his financial empire through a combination of sharp instincts and an unshakable belief that most people were fundamentally dishonest when given the opportunity. His father had taught him that trust was a luxury successful men couldn't afford, and 30 years in business had seemingly confirmed that philosophy. Marcus approached the office with his usual careful respect. Through the glass walls, he could see Sterling's desk, cluttered with documents bearing signatures worth millions. Family photos showed Sterling with his ex-wife and estranged children, relationships that had crumbled under the weight of his suspicious nature and relentless work schedule. As Marcus began dusting the mahogany surfaces, he noticed something odd. A financial report lay open on Sterling's desk, filled with the same errors he'd heard the executives discussing. Without thinking, Marcus found himself reading the projections, his trained eye immediately spotting the miscalculations that would cost Sterling Industries nearly $40 million. His hand hovered over the paper for a moment, years of expertise flooding back. Then he caught himself, stepped back, and continued cleaning. It wasn't his place anymore to save companies from their mistakes. That part of his life was over. The next morning brought the familiar chaos of the day shift arriving. Marcus had learned to time his departure perfectly, slipping out through the service entrance as the executives flooded in with their coffee cups and urgent phone calls. But today, elevator maintenance forced him to use the main lobby, where he found himself invisible among the sea of tailored suits and clicking heels. A group of junior analysts clustered near the elevator bank, their voices carrying across the marble floor. Marcus recognized them as the same executives whose flawed merger analysis he'd seen the night before. They were congratulating themselves on the presentation they'd be giving to Sterling that afternoon, completely unaware of the financial disaster they were about to recommend. One of them, a young man with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch, noticed Marcus waiting for the elevator. His expression shifted from casual indifference to mild disgust as he took in the janitor's uniform and weathered appearance. The analyst whispered something to his colleague, and both men chuckled before stepping pointedly away from Marcus. The rejection stung more than Marcus cared to admit. 3 years ago, these same men would have sought his advice, hung on his every word about market trends and investment strategies. He'd been Marcus Thompson, senior financial advisor at Blackstone Partners, managing portfolios worth hundreds of millions. Now he was just another service worker, invisible and dismissed. The elevator arrived, and the analysts pushed past him without acknowledgement. Marcus stepped in last, pressed the button for the parking garage, and watched the numbers descend as his former life remained 20 floors above. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma's school about an upcoming field trip that would cost $60. Money he didn't have, for an experience his brilliant daughter deserved. As Marcus walked to his beat-up Honda in the dim parking garage, he made himself a promise. He would find a way to give Emma everything she needed, even if it meant staying invisible forever. That evening, Richard Sterling sat in his corner office long after the building had emptied, studying security footage from the previous night. For months, he'd been plagued by small but costly incidents. Office supplies disappearing, confidential documents misplaced, and last week, someone had accessed his computer after hours. His father's voice echoed in his mind, "Trust no one, especially those with nothing to lose." Sterling had narrowed his suspicions to the night cleaning crew, and Marcus Thompson seemed the most likely candidate. A background check had revealed bankruptcy, medical debt, and a desperate single father with every reason to steal. Tonight, Sterling would get his proof. He opened the wall safe behind his desk, normally hidden by a landscape painting. Inside lay neat stacks of cash, $50,000 in hundreds that he'd withdrawn specifically for this trap. Sterling positioned the bills so they'd be clearly visible, then adjusted the hidden camera he'd installed earlier that day. The lens had a perfect view of the safe's interior. Sterling left the office door unlocked and the safe wide open, its contents gleaming under the overhead lights like a test of human nature. He retreated to the 21st floor, where he could monitor the live camera feed from his laptop. All he had to do was wait for Marcus to reveal his true character. At 11:45, Marcus arrived for his shift, unaware that his every move was being watched. He worked his way through the lower floors with his usual methodical precision, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces with the same care he'd once applied to financial portfolios. As he approached Sterling's office, Marcus noticed immediately that something was different. The door stood slightly ajar, and a strange golden glow emanated from within. He knocked softly, calling out hello in case Sterling was working late. Silence answered him. Marcus pushed the door open and stepped inside, then froze. The safe hung open like a mouth full of money, more cash than he'd seen since his banking days. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stared at the neat stacks of hundreds. $50,000, maybe more. Enough to pay Emma's school fees for the next 3 years, to move them out of their cramped apartment, to stop working 3 jobs just to survive. His hands trembled as he approached the safe, drawn by desperation and opportunity. 21 floors above, Sterling leaned forward at his laptop screen, watching Marcus's every move through the hidden camera. This was it. The moment that would confirm everything Sterling believed about human nature. He'd seen that look before, the hunger in a desperate person's eyes when they thought no one was watching. Marcus reached toward the money, his fingers inches from the bills. Emma's face flashed in his mind, her excited voice talking about the field trip he couldn't afford, the new shoes she needed, the college fund that remained heartbreakingly empty. One stack of bills would solve everything. No one would know. Sterling clearly had so much money that he'd left a fortune sitting open in his safe. But as Marcus's hand hovered over the cash, another memory surfaced. His wife Sarah's voice from 3 years ago, weak from chemotherapy but still fierce with conviction. She'd made him promise something as she lay dying in their hospital bed. "Promise me you'll always be the man Emma can be proud of," she'd whispered. "Promise me you'll show her what integrity looks like, even when it costs everything." Marcus pulled his hand back as if the money had burned him. He stepped away from the safe, breathing hard, and looked around the office with new eyes. This wasn't right. Sterling would never leave his safe open by accident. Someone as paranoid and successful as Richard Sterling didn't make mistakes like this. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This was a test. A trap. Sterling was watching him right now, waiting for him to prove that poverty had finally corrupted his character. Marcus felt a surge of anger at being manipulated, followed by a deeper sadness that this was what his life had become. Marcus walked to Sterling's desk and pulled out a piece of company letterhead. His handwriting, once praised by colleagues for its precision, remained steady despite his emotional turmoil. He wrote carefully, choosing each word with the same attention he'd once given to million-dollar investment recommendations. "Mr. Sterling," he began, "I discovered your office safe open during my cleaning rounds tonight. For security purposes, I've closed and secured it. You may want to check your lock mechanism, as it appears to have malfunctioned. I've also noticed unusual activity near the executive offices this week and recommend reviewing your security protocols. Respectfully, Marcus Thompson, Night Maintenance Staff." He folded the note and placed it prominently on Sterling's desk where it couldn't be missed. Then Marcus approached the safe, his movements deliberate and careful. He pushed the heavy door closed until he heard the lock mechanism click into place. The money disappeared behind steel and concrete, taking temptation with it. 21 floors above, Sterling stared at his laptop screen in stunned silence. He'd expected to watch Marcus stuff his pockets with cash, to finally have proof of his cynical worldview. Instead, he'd witnessed something that challenged everything he believed about human nature. The janitor had not only resisted stealing but had actually secured Sterling's assets and left a professional warning about security risks. Sterling read the note 3 times, studying Marcus's handwriting and the formal tone that seemed oddly sophisticated for a janitor. Something didn't add up. The writing style, the security assessment, even the way Marcus had approached the safe showed a level of professionalism that didn't match his current position. What part of this story resonates most with you? Share your thoughts with our global community as we discover what happens when integrity meets opportunity. Marcus finished cleaning the office with mechanical precision, his mind racing with questions about his own future. He completed his rounds an hour early, unable to shake the feeling that tonight had changed something fundamental between him and Sterling. As he rode the elevator down to the parking garage, he wondered if he'd still have a job in the morning. The next evening, Sterling waited in his office with growing anticipation. He'd spent the entire day researching Marcus Thompson, digging deeper than his initial background check. What he'd discovered raised more questions than answers. Marcus had indeed declared bankruptcy 3 years ago, but the circumstances were far more complex than Sterling had initially understood. Medical records showed massive hospital bills for his wife's cancer treatment. Financial documents revealed that Marcus had liquidated his entire retirement portfolio, cashed out his life insurance, and taken a second mortgage on their home to pay for experimental treatments. He hadn't lost his fortune through poor decisions or gambling. He'd sacrificed everything trying to save the woman he loved. Sterling left the safe open again, but this time with a different test. Instead of cash, he placed a Rolex Submariner worth $30,000 on his desk, along with several rare gold coins from his personal collection. If Marcus was truly honest, he'd secure these items too. If desperation had finally broken his moral code, Sterling would know tonight. At midnight, Marcus entered the office and immediately noticed the valuable items scattered across Sterling's desk. The watch alone was worth more than he earned in a year. He shook his head in disbelief. Sterling was escalating his tests, apparently determined to find Marcus's breaking point. Marcus gathered the watch and coins carefully, placing them in Sterling's desk drawer and turning the key. He left another note, this one shorter but equally professional. Mr. Sterling, valuable items were left unsecured on your desk. I've locked them in your drawer for safekeeping. The key is in your top left desk organizer. Please consider using your safe for such valuables. M. Thompson. Sterling watched the entire interaction through his hidden camera, growing more intrigued by the minute. By the third night, Sterling's tests had become almost absurd. He scattered signed bearer bonds worth over $100,000 across his office floor, left his laptop open to confidential merger documents, and placed his personal checkbook prominently on the desk with a pen beside it. Any dishonest employee could have stolen his identity, sold his secrets, or forged checks that would take weeks to discover. Marcus entered the office and surveyed the chaos with the weary expression of a man who'd seen too much of human nature's darker side. He methodically gathered the bonds, secured the laptop, and locked the checkbook in Sterling's safe. His note that night was longer, written with barely contained frustration. Mr. Sterling, he wrote, tonight I found your office in an extremely compromised state. Bearer bonds were scattered on the floor, your computer contained open confidential files, and your personal financial instruments were left accessible. I've secured everything as best I could, but I strongly recommend you contact building security about a possible break-in. If someone is testing your security systems, they're creating serious liability issues for both you and Sterling Industries. This level of carelessness is unlike anything I've observed in my 8 months here. Please take immediate action to protect your assets and this company's reputation. Sterling read the note 3 times, struck by its professional tone and sophisticated understanding of corporate liability. The writing style was completely inconsistent with Marcus's supposed background. This wasn't the vocabulary of a janitor. These were the words of someone with extensive business experience. Driven by curiosity that bordered on obsession, Sterling began making phone calls. He contacted his head of human resources, demanding Marcus's complete employment file. He called the cleaning company, asking detailed questions about their background checks. Most importantly, he reached out to contacts at Blackstone Partners, the financial firm listed as Marcus's last employer. What he learned changed everything he thought he knew about the quiet man who cleaned his office each night. The call to Blackstone Partners connected Sterling with Thomas Blackstone himself, a man Sterling had known professionally for over a decade. When Sterling mentioned Marcus Thompson's name, the response was immediate and emotional. Marcus Thompson, Blackstone said, his voice heavy with regret, was the most brilliant financial analyst I ever had the privilege to work with. We all called him the Oracle because his market predictions were uncannily accurate. He single-handedly saved our clients over $200 million during the 2019 recession. When his wife got sick, Marcus liquidated everything to pay for her treatment. We offered to help, but he was too proud to accept charity. Sterling listened in stunned silence as Blackstone continued. Marcus had been managing portfolios worth over $400 million when his world collapsed. He'd worked 16-hour days while caring for his dying wife, never missing a client meeting or failing to deliver results. After Sarah's death, he'd simply disappeared, unable to face the financial world that reminded him of everything he'd lost. He was the most ethical man I've ever known in this business, Blackstone concluded. If Marcus Thompson is working as a janitor, it's because he's rebuilding his life from the ground up, not because he lacks talent or integrity. Sterling hung up the phone with his worldview completely shattered. For weeks, he'd been testing a man whose integrity had already been proven under the worst possible circumstances. Marcus hadn't stolen Sterling's money because stealing wasn't in his nature, not because he lacked opportunity or courage. That night, Sterling didn't leave any traps. Instead, he waited in his office, hidden behind his desk, determined to speak with Marcus face to face. When midnight approached, he heard the familiar sound of the cleaning cart in the hallway, followed by Marcus's gentle knock on the door. "Come in," Sterling called out, stepping into view. Marcus froze in the doorway, clearly surprised to find his boss working so late. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus said carefully, "I can come back later if you're busy." "No," Sterling replied, his voice unusually soft. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Marcus stepped into the office cautiously, setting his cleaning supplies aside. He'd never seen Sterling look so uncomfortable, so uncertain. The powerful businessman who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals seemed suddenly vulnerable, almost guilty. "I owe you an apology," Sterling began, his words coming slowly. "For the past 3 nights, I've been testing you. The open safe, the valuables left on my desk, the bearer bonds scattered on the floor. It was all deliberate." Marcus felt his stomach drop, but his expression remained steady. "I know," he said quietly. "I figured that out the first night." Sterling's eyes widened in surprise. "You knew? Then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you confront me or quit?" Marcus was silent for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because I understood why you did it," he finally replied. "You're a successful man with a lot to lose. Trust doesn't come easily in your position. I've been where you are, Mr. Sterling. I know what it feels like to believe that everyone around you has an agenda." Sterling studied Marcus's face, seeing traces of the man Thomas Blackstone had described. The quiet dignity, the careful intelligence, the wounded pride that came from losing everything. "He knows about my background," Marcus realized, watching Sterling's expression change. "Thomas Blackstone spoke very highly of you," Sterling said, confirming Marcus's suspicion. "He told me about your wife, about what you sacrificed for her treatment. He called you the most ethical man he'd ever known in finance." Marcus's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Sterling saw a flash of the pain that drove this man to clean offices instead of managing portfolios. "That was a lifetime ago," Marcus said. "I'm not that person anymore." "Aren't you?" Sterling challenged gently. "The merger analysis sitting on my desk right now is completely flawed. My team is about to recommend a deal that will cost this company $40 million. But you spotted the errors immediately, didn't you? Even while emptying my wastebasket, you were thinking 10 steps ahead of my highest-paid analysts." Marcus's composure finally cracked. His hands trembled as 3 years of suppressed emotion threatened to overwhelm him. "Mr. Sterling, with respect, you don't understand what it's like to lose everything. To watch your wife die while you're calculating debt ratios and liquidating assets to pay for treatments that ultimately fail. I used to manage $400 million in portfolios. Now I clean toilets and scrub floors, and I'm grateful for the work because it pays for my daughter's breakfast." The raw pain in Marcus's voice hit Sterling like a physical blow. He realized that his tests hadn't just been about honesty. They'd been a form of torture for a man already broken by circumstances beyond his control. "Your merger analysis is wrong because it doesn't account for the target company's hidden pension liabilities," Marcus continued, his professional instincts overriding his emotional walls. "The debt-to-equity calculations are using outdated numbers from last quarter's filings. When those pension obligations hit the books next year, you'll be looking at a leveraged buyout that will destroy both companies' credit ratings." Sterling grabbed a pen and started taking notes, amazed at the depth of Marcus's analysis. In 5 minutes, Marcus had identified problems that Sterling's team of MBAs had missed after weeks of research. "The acquisition price should be $43 million, not $67 million, Marcus concluded. "And the deal should be structured as an asset purchase, not a stock merger, to isolate the pension liabilities. If you proceed with your current plan, Sterling Industries will be filing for Chapter 11 protection within 18 months. Sterling set down his pen and looked at Marcus with newfound respect. This wasn't just intelligence. This was genius-level financial analysis delivered by a man wearing a janitor's uniform. "Marcus," Sterling said quietly, "I need your help. Not as a janitor. As the financial expert you've always been. Will you consider coming back to the world you left behind?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Marcus stared at Sterling for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities he'd refused to consider for 3 years. The financial world had been his life before Sarah's illness, but it had also been the source of the stress that kept him away from her bedside during those final precious months. He'd sworn never to return to that life of 16-hour days and endless pressure. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Sterling," Marcus said finally, "but I can't go back to managing portfolios. I won't sacrifice time with Emma the way I did with Sarah. My daughter needs her father present, not successful." Sterling nodded, understanding the deeper wound behind Marcus's refusal. What if it didn't have to be the same? What if you could use your skills to help families instead of just making rich people richer? Marcus looked puzzled, so Sterling continued. "I've been thinking about starting a charitable foundation, something focused on helping families facing medical crises. Families like yours was. The foundation would need someone who understands both financial markets and personal tragedy. Someone who could make smart investments while never losing sight of the human cost." The idea resonated with Marcus in a way he hadn't expected. He thought about all the families he'd met in hospital waiting rooms, watching their savings disappear as their loved ones fought for survival. If he could help prevent others from facing the same impossible choices he'd faced, maybe his experience would have meaning beyond loss. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson sat in his new office on the 22nd floor of Sterling Industries, reviewing grant applications for the Sterling Family Foundation. His title was Chief Investment Officer, but his real job was hope. The foundation had already helped dozens of families avoid bankruptcy while seeking medical treatment for their loved ones. Emma visited him every Tuesday after school, doing her homework at the small table Sterling had installed specifically for her. She'd beam with pride as she introduced herself to visitors as the daughter of the man who helped sick people's families. Marcus had kept his promise to Sarah. He'd remain someone Emma could be proud of. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're listening from and subscribe for more inspiring stories about the hidden heroes among us.